directions people go in from those 3 different aisles in the stairs of separation. If you went down the left-hand aisle, you board a ferry bound for New York City. Just straight ahead and to your right, about a third of the immigrants stay in the New York area. If you went down the right-hand aisle of the stairs, you board a different ferry, and you're bound for the state of New Jersey, which you can see a little of to the left through the trees. If you look through those trees, you can just see a red brick building in the distance with a gray steeple. Some of you might have caught the ferry there today. That building used to be one of the train terminals in New Jersey. So if your destination as an immigrant is outside the New York area, you'll go to one of those stations and board a train and continue your journey. If you went down the middle aisle of the stairs and you're being detained here, remember if it's for medical reasons you go to the hospital, but if you're detained for legal reasons you'll stay in a dormitory room, probably in that big building to the left, which is the main dormitory. There are also a handful of dorm rooms in this building. That's what the 3rd floor balcony rooms are for. Now the good news is that after all these exams, even after 20% of you have been detained, in the end, 98% of you all will be admitted into the country. Only 2% of the people are sent back. And your reward for successfully completing the inspection is that you're now a legal resident of the United States. So welcome to America. About 12 million people went through this process to immigrate to Ellis Island. And today about 40% of all Americans have a family member who came to this place. So getting cleared through Ellis is not the end of the story. It's just the beginning of a new life in the USA. My last question for you, and you can answer this for any immigrant for any time or place. Can you name one thing that your immigrant ancestor contributed to the United States? Do you know what kind of work they did, something they built or made?
My grandfather was an engineer for Studebaker.
Engineer for Studebaker,
which doesn't even exist anymore.
Anybody remember Studebaker? You know what that is? Making cars. Designing cars.
But before they made that, they made wagons and all types of parts of farming. I actually have a hand-drawn spring.
Oh, wow.
Spring
suspension.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So, transportation, factories.
Both my grandfathers actually served World War II. They both got citizenship for serving World War II from Mexico.
Serving in the military. So that's a very common thing for male immigrants to do, however they got into it. Yep. And in fact, immigrants typically enlist in the military in greater percentages than native born.
How about building the infrastructure, roads and paddy fields, growing fields, paddy fields, agriculture.
Okay. Two more common things for immigrants to do: construction and agriculture, feeding everybody. So anything basically that could be made or built, immigrants are doing. They're working in factories and sweatshops. They're working outdoors, constructing things. They're doing dangerous work down in the mines, for example. They're setting up small businesses. And while they're doing all of this, they're bringing their culture, their music and art and food. Where would we be without Italian food in this country now? That comes directly from Ellis Island era immigrants. So you can say that 40% of the America we see today comes from Ellis Island era immigrants and their descendants. But the Ellis Island era does come to an end. The beginning of the end is about 100 years ago, July 1st, 1924. That's when a new law takes effect, limiting the number of immigrants who can enter the country, setting up a quota system. And the first quotas are specifically designed to discriminate against the very ethnic groups that are coming the most to Ellis Island. People from Southern Europe and Eastern Europe, who are considered by some Americans to be inferior immigrants to the Northern and Western Europeans who had settled the country earlier. To implement the quotas, they changed the whole process to the visa system that we still use today. So after a transition period in the mid-20s, if you want to immigrate after that, you do all your inspections and paperwork before you travel, getting a visa at the U.S. consulate in the country you're leaving. When your ship pulls into New York Harbor, an inspector gets on board to check your papers. If your visa is in order, that's the end of it. The ship docks at its pier in New York and you get off there. You never come to Ellis Island. So from the mid-20s on, Ellis becomes strictly a detention and deportation center for a small trickle of people who could not go through the normal process overseas or who have a problem once they reach this country. Finally, in 1954, the government decides it doesn't need Ellis Island anymore. So the place is closed down and abandoned. The weather and vandalism turned this building into a ruin, just like the dormitory still is, like the hospital still is. But in 1965, President Johnson declares Ellis to be part of Statue of Liberty National Monument under the National Park Service. And $160 million are raised from public donations to restore this building, to bring it back to the way it was during the peak immigration years. So we're able to reopen in 1990 as the Ellis Island Immigration Museum as a permanent monument to all of America's immigrants. Now I hope during the tour that you've gotten a better understanding of the kind of transformation the immigrants made here, from weary travelers into residents of the USA. I hope I've also given you a few things to think about the next time someone brings up the subject of immigration. We're still arguing about a lot of the same immigration issues today as they were in Ellis Island's day. It's just that the ethnic groups have changed once again. I want to encourage you to see the rest of this museum. I normally say we've got 3 floors full of exhibits, but the exhibits on the first floor are closed right now. But I do encourage you to see the exhibits in those 2 corners on this room, and then more on the 3rd floor. We've also got an award-winning movie and the Immigration Records Center. If anyone has last questions, I will stick around. Otherwise, thank you all for joining me and staying with me on this very long tour.